everyone, Reginald Scott here. Welcome to the video. Great to see you all again. Hope you're having a lovely day today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with a friend and comment below if you do enjoy the video. Right, I'm about to cross a flooded road. The weather's been fairly good here in Brunei, apart from it's been chucking down with rain an awful lot. And as you can see, the roads have flooded. I'm going to show you some flooded houses in a minute, because there's a lot. The trick with crossing a flooded road like this is to go slowly so that the water doesn't fly up in the air too much, and stand on the pedals so your feet are above the water, and then kind of just sort of do like a track stand, but move your foot up and down, or your feet up and down, just pressing the pedal slightly in little jabs like this. So that will get you to go across the water without doing a full rotation of the pedal, and so you won't dunk your feet in the water. That's the trick. Now it's going to get pretty deep over here, so my foot might go under anyway, but that's the way you cross sort of slightly flooded roads. If they're really deep, well, you have to be careful. Probably best to just sit down and drop a few gears and look out for potholes, because the potholes will be hidden under the water, and if you hit a pothole when you're crossing water, it can be a very unimpressive, unpleasant experience. The added danger here in Brunei is there are crocodiles. So we are keeping an eye open at the sides of the road if there's any crocs or anything, because we don't want to get snatched. It's unlikely, but it is a possibility, you know. Alright, not too fast. Oh, that was far too fast. Yep, I got a very wet foot there. Never mind. I've got a guy behind me, so I'm trying to move a bit quicker, and this is pretty deep, so it's too late now. I'm just going to get wet feet and live with it. But yeah, this is the technique anyway. Forget it. It's alright, it's only about that deep. Whee! Splish splash. Okay, this is way too fast. I'm getting a wet bum now. Yeah, that was a bad idea. Oh well. I'll dry. So yeah, welcome to the video. Today we're going to talk about lightweight versus aero. Which is better? I'll put my cards right on the table straight away. I will say lightweight is better than aero. Okay, controversial thing to say, I know, because the status quo, the recognized belief right now is that aero is everything, right? If a bike frame is lightweight, generally they have certain characteristics and frame designs, and if they're aero, they have certain characteristics and certain frame designs, and those two things are very different, and they give you a very different set of benefits and negatives, if you like. So lots of different pluses and minuses. So we're going to look at that today, and I'll give you my reasoning for why I'd always prefer lightweight over aero. So we're out in the very villagey area right now of where I sometimes go riding, and here we go. This is a perfect example. Let's go across to the other side. Look out for crocodiles. Let's have a look. So this house here is a very traditional Bruneian style house. Back in the old days, they were all made of wood. This house obviously has got bricks and concrete on it, but it's a lot of wood. If you go around Brunei occasionally, I'll try and point one out the next time I see one, but occasionally they're completely made of wood. And they used to be on stilts like this, with a staircase leading up to the living area. And the reason for that, of course, was because everywhere used to flood. It's a rainforest. So you get lots and lots of rain. There's lots and lots of lowlands where, yeah, everything just floods. So the people back then, when they selected an area to build a house, they naturally built it on stilts just in case they would end up getting flooded. And a lot of these residences have little boats that they use to get to and from their house when it floods like this. And you'll notice all the cars, look, are parked on the road, all the way down the road. And that is because every single house here, when it starts to rain, they move their cars away from the house. Some have got little ramps that they put the car on top of underneath the house to protect it, but then obviously they can't use the car while there's flooding going on. So either they've got a second car or it's an old car they don't use or something like that. But generally speaking, most of them park their cars on the road, as you can see, and then when it floods they've still got their car. They've got a little boat that they use to get backwards and forwards. Now, like I say, the danger is you've got the rivers. This looks like to me the river coming through here under the bridge. You will have crocs in there. Some of them can get pretty darn big. I mean, we're talking man-eaters. And so you've got to get from the road to your house and avoid the crocodiles. So, not a great situation to be in, to be honest with you. I think if I was living here, I'd consider moving if I could. Right, let's carry on talking about lightweight versus aero. And avoid getting eaten by crocodiles. That's always a good thing to do. That's something I definitely don't recommend. I don't recommend being eaten by a crocodile. Oh wow, yeah, you can really see. I'll show you this one here. Look, there's another house, look. That one isn't on stilts even. That one just appears to be completely flooded. And then there's some more houses down there as well. Just to angle the camera. There you go. Fascinating. But like I say, they've got a little boat, look. And they've got the cars out here. So they're used to it. This is how they live. Interesting. Really interesting. They've even got their little post box, look, at the front here like they do in America. So you can drop off the mail at the front rather than having to wade through the crocodile-infested water. I mean, I know postmen usually have it bad, having to avoid dogs, but it's a lot worse having to avoid a 300-kilo croc. Anywho, where was I? Yeah, lightweight versus aero. So, as I've established, we are not pros. So, you've got to look at it from a non-professional perspective, which is you're going to be riding your bike, you know, every day or as often as you can, I would hope. And you want to get maximum amount of enjoyment out of riding that bike. And although personal bests are all very fun, and you know, going for those segments on Strava is a lot of fun, in reality, that's not what most of us are doing on a day-to-day business. Most of us are just riding for the sheer pleasure of it, riding socially, riding for work. You know, what we need is a bike that functions well and fulfills those needs. Everything else that can be aero on both kinds of bikes, right? So if you've got a climbing bike, it's a lightweight climbing bike, it's got a narrow frame, it's lightweight, maybe it's got rim brakes, you know, you can put aero wheels on that. Yeah, you can put aerodynamic handlebars on that. You can, you know, put aerodynamic bottles on it. Aerodynamic everything, you know. The only thing that won't be aerodynamic is the bike frame itself. Now, some lightweight climbing bikes have aerodynamic features. They're not solely dedicated towards being a full-on aero bike. And when I say like full-on aero bike, I'd be talking about something like the Trek Madone, okay? That was like fully dedicated to being fairly aero, or something like the Cervelo. Is it S5? These are dedicated aero bikes. Whereas nowadays, a lot of climbing bikes have aero features, so they're not totally un-aero. And the next thing you've got to ask yourself is like, how un-aero is an un-aero bike? The steel frame that I'm riding right now, it's got an aero fork on it. It's made of carbon fibre, but the frame itself The tubes are rounded, they're quite narrow, so they don't present much of a face to the air that's going past them. So they're probably not that unaerodynamic, you know, they're probably not creating that much turbulence, or not much more turbulence than you would create with any other bike. We're talking about very, very slight improvements overall. And to illustrate this point, and I've illustrated this point before, somebody, I can't remember who, did a wind tunnel test a while back, and they wind tunnel tested a giant TCR against a Trek Madone. And at lower speeds, and we're talking lower, when I say lower speed, I mean less than 45, less than 45 or 50, there was basically no difference between the Trek Madone and the TCR. TCR is considered a climbing bike. The Trek Madone is considered an aero bike. And even worse than that, for the aero bike, at certain yaw angles, which is the direction in which the wind hits the bike frame, the TCR was actually more aero at lower speed, because it's presenting less of a surface to the oncoming air. If you have very wide tubes, long, wide aeroplane wing style tubes, like a lot of these aero bikes have, and the wind hits you at a funny angle, which wind does. Right now the wind is kind of swirling all around me, and it's not very consistent. When the wind hits those big wide surfaces, it creates more turbulence than if it was just a standard round tube. Because the standard round tube, no matter which way the air hits it, it presents the same amount of surface area, and it creates the same amount of turbulence. Whereas with the aero tubing, if the wind hits them perfectly, they're more aero than the round tube. But if the wind hits them at the wrong angle, they're actually less aero. So in the real world, not in a wind tunnel test like the one that was done, how much more aero overall over, say, a long course would a bicycle that was aero versus a non-aero bike actually be? And often people quote times, and they get these times from the aero testing. These are hypothetical times. They're from the wind tunnel testing. Very rarely, in fact I think almost never, are these times gained from real world testing. It's always wind tunnel, and a wind tunnel is a controlled environment, so it's a theoretical, like 12 seconds faster kind of thing, right? It's theoretical. In reality, it could be the same or even slower, depending on what the wind is doing that day. Okay. The next thing is, there was a video I've mentioned at least twice before. I love it. It really cracks me up. And it is where they tested an old I want to say 1980s, but it might have been 1990s, steel frame Colnago against like a 2000s, you know, a recent carbon fiber Aero Colnago. So the carbon fiber Aero Colnago was disc brake, carbon fiber frame, you know, carbon fiber handlebar, aero, everything, you know, a latest electronic group set. And the steel frame Colnago was everything made of metal, basically. The handlebar was probably aluminium, and the group set was what, like 8 speed or something, maybe less. And they did a climbing test and an aero test between these two bikes. Now the old steel Colnago lost the climbing test, and they believe mostly that was because of the gear ratio. The old Colnago had old-fashioned gears, and I think it had like 1125 and a standard chainring like 5339, and the new Colnago had 1132 or 1130 something, maybe even 1134, I don't know, but big. And it had a compact chainring, or maybe even a semi-compact, I'm not sure. But basically the reason why the Colnago won was nothing to do with the frame technology. It was because it got better gearing for climbing up the hill. And during the TT, the old Colnago, the steel frame Colnago, beat the modern Aero Colnago.
And the difference between the two rides, once adjusted, was 6.3 watts in the Master's favour. I have to say, I was pretty surprised by that result. But Xavier said that 6.3 watts really was within the error margin, and small things like traffic and I remember an oncoming tractor when I was riding the C68, things like that would skew the result.
So that kind of leads me back to what I was saying. If an ultra modern aero carbon bike can't beat an old-fashioned steel frame in a basic time trial, and I mean significantly beat, that you would say without shadow of a doubt that bike is faster. If it can't do that, then how much does an aero frame actually matter? Now, I've quantified this in previous videos as well, and as you know, the basic calculations, you know, there is some argument about this, but the very basic calculations are as follows. 80% of your aerodynamic drag is your body, 16% is your wheels, and everything else, the remaining 4%, is frame, group set, saddle, seat post, handlebars, bar tape, shifters, pedals, shoes, you know, you name it. Everything else is in that 4%. So the amount that your frame alone contributes to your overall aerodynamic drag is probably about 1% of your total drag. So that really goes to show how much you're actually gaining by forking out for an aero frame. Okay, but let's assume for the moment that none of that matters. Let's assume for the moment that that's all wrong and all my analysis from that perspective is wrong, and actually an aero frame will be slightly faster than a non-aero frame across a specified distance, whatever, on a flat road. Okay. Not all roads are flat. That was a bit close. Come on, dude. Nice quiet road. Where was that? Yeah. Not all roads are flat. You know, we don't all live in Holland. So when you start to go uphill, the aerodynamic advantages decrease, gravity starts to take over, and at a certain point your aerodynamic frame is working against you because of the weight, and so a lightweight bike is going to climb better. And we saw this demonstrated numerous times during the Tour de France back in the day when the rim brake lightweight climbing bike was still a thing, and about 90 odd percent, 98% of the peloton was on aero disc bikes. We watched Giro and Vuelta and Tour de France absolutely dominated. I remember, absolutely dominated by the lightweight climbing bikes, because overall they were always faster. It didn't matter that they were losing a couple of watts on the flat, if they were losing a couple of watts on the flat, because they were working together with other cyclists in the peloton. The time that you see the cyclists often break up is during the climbs. You know, you'll see them in groups of 1 or 2, right, going up the climbs. And that's when your aerodynamics just doesn't matter anymore, because lightweight is everything. And so the lightweight climbing bikes were more than able to keep up on the flat, and then when they got to the mountains they had the advantage. And that was evident from the results of all those races. You know, sometimes on the podium you'd get first, second and third place held by lightweight rim brake climbing bikes, when 98% of the peloton was all on disc brake bikes with aero frames. Where should I stick my bike? Move around here.
Beta!
Thank you. Now I know the marketing departments want us to believe that aero bikes are so much faster than climbing bikes now, but I'm just not seeing that evidence. You know, call it pattern recognition or whatever you like. Is that a smelly truck from earlier? Oh dear. God, I still burn the oil. You know, call it pattern recognition. Sorry that I noticed things, but I'm just not seeing in the real world aero bikes outperforming climbing bikes. I'm not even seeing rim, you know, like rim versus disc, for example. The older rim bikes versus the newer disc. I think Cam Nichols or somebody did a test. One of the Australian YouTubers did a test between an old BMC and a new BMC. So obviously the new BMC is disc brake and the old one is rim brake. And obviously the newer one has got more aero features than the old one. And I believe the old one was faster.
I am genuinely dumb.
Finally! The confession we've all been waiting for!
Founded. I don't know how to start this video. I don't really know what to do with this video. So I figure, why don't I just share the results with you and you can make up your own minds. The rim brake bike goes up the climb consistently at 3 minutes and 22 seconds. On average, 5 seconds faster than the disc brake BMC. Now, all I'm gonna say here is I have been doing these test runs for 4 years now, since December 2020, and those times that the rim brake bike did at 350 watts, yes, it's different days to the other bikes, but they are the fastest times up that climb I have ever seen, and all the bikes that I have tested over the past 4 years are disc brake bikes. Additionally, I would say 2 to 3 seconds up a 3.5 minute climb advantage is quite a considerable advantage. So 5 seconds, I'll let you decide.
So there you go. Anyway, I'm just not seeing the evidence, okay? I'm not seeing it in the Pro Tour. I'm not seeing it in local races. I'm not seeing aero bikes dominate over climbing bikes. And like with the climbing thing, people talk about, oh, you still get an aero benefit when you're climbing. But how is it that, you know, when people are really discussing this in depth, they'll say things like, oh, you know, you need to be doing 40, 45, 50 kilometers an hour in order to get that proper aero benefit. And yet when you're climbing up a mountain, you're not doing 50 kilometers an hour usually. You know, most people are not even doing 40. So where's your aero benefit? All you're doing is dragging extra weight up there. That's all you're doing. So no, I don't see how they are faster. When you talk about TT bikes, just for a moment, that's a whole different ball game, because TT bikes, if you've not noticed, are like this. And when I do that on this bike, my speed instantly goes up by a couple of kilometers an hour just from doing this. So it's the body position that helps the TT bike most of all. The geometry in the frame is designed around keeping the rider in that optimum body position, which is, you know, 80% of your total drag. It's way better to work on that 80% than it is to work on that 1% of the frame. Anyway, all that to one side for the moment. All the supposed aero benefits, the speed benefits in an aero bike, put that all to the side. You are sacrificing a lot to get one benefit. A climbing bike, by its very nature, is going to be lighter. It's going to be easier to handle, move around. A climbing bike is going to be easier to work on, you know, to service, because these aero bikes have a lot of integration in them now. I mean, all bikes have got a lot of integration in them, but say if you go for a more old-fashioned style climbing bike over a more modern aero bike, it's going to be a lot easier for you to do certain services on that bike than it is for the person with the aero bike, because the aero bikes have got lots of proprietary kit. They've got lots of little plastic covers and hidden cables and all this sort of stuff, fairings, in order to make them more aero. So every time you work on one of those bikes, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to take longer. You have to remove more things. Like if you've seen the stem on say a giant Propel, for example, yeah, the thing has got like 8 sets of tiny screws in it in order to get at the cables. You've got to undo 8 little tiny screws. I see the 6 or 8 little tiny screws just to get at the cables. Aero bike. Compare that with an old TCR, you know, a lot simpler, a lot easier to work on. So again, you're sacrificing ease of use, ease of maintenance, you know, ease to live with it for 1 or 2 watts aero advantage that you may or may not benefit from. The next thing is climbing bikes, again, because of their design, they tend to have narrower tubes. They tend to have a bit more give in them to some extent. They tend to be a lot more comfortable. Again, using the example of the TCR, which everybody knows, you know, TCR, very popular bike. The TCR is a much more comfortable bike to ride than the Propel. The Propel is like riding on a breeze block, you know. It's like riding a concrete block. It's got no give in it whatsoever. It's very uncomfortable. The TCR, it's actually a pretty sweet ride. I'm not a big carbon bike fan, but I will admit the TCR is not a bad riding bike. Okay, so you're sacrificing, again, usually with an aero bike, you're sacrificing comfort for that supposed aero gain. The next thing is sprinting. So when you want to accelerate an object, okay, the weight of the object matters, because the heavier the object is, the more energy you've got to put into it to get it moving. Okay, so if you've got I don't know, an air-filled football, and next to it you've got a bowling ball, if you try to roll the two forward with your toe, you will notice that it's a lot more difficult to get the bowling ball moving. Now, once the bowling ball gets moving, it carries its speed really well. But that initial acceleration is difficult. So when you have a heavier bike, like say for example an aero bike versus a climbing bike, the heavier bike is going to be a lot harder to accelerate on. That means you're going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to sprinting. So if you're coming up to the finish line and you're neck and neck with a guy on a climbing bike, a lightweight climbing bike, and you're carrying, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 grams more weight on your bike, then there's a good chance that that climbing bike will out-accelerate you, because you've got to get that thing moving. Right, and to do that, you need more energy. So, not only does a climbing bike win going uphill, it wins on the flat where it really matters. Closing gaps, yeah? When you start to drop off the back of the peloton, or the group ride on a Sunday, what you want is a nice, snappy, lightweight bike to accelerate back into the group. Yeah, not bad, 56. That's a lot harder to do if your bike is heavier. And aero bikes will always be heavier. Ah, disgusting cars again. Phew. Climbing bikes beat aero bikes. Because not only do I not believe that modern aero bikes are faster than lightweight climbing bikes overall, even if they do have a slight aero advantage when it comes to racing, Because in racing, you spend much of your time shielded in the wind by the other people in the peloton. So if you're in a big group, right, that's moving 45, 50 kilometers an hour, doesn't matter what bike you're on, even on this steel frame bike, it's an absolute breeze. You just breeze along inside that group, being pulled along, sucked along with the draft. It doesn't matter what bike you're on, it makes no difference, because you're still getting the same benefit. The only time the aero bike might matter is if you're on your own. And if you're on your own, you'll probably be doing one of a few different things. One is you might have dropped off the bike, you've been dropped. So having an aero bike at that stage probably not going to help you all that much. Another one is that you're doing like a solo breakaway or something. Well, if you're that strong, then that's fine. It might help you, especially if the road is flat. If it's a flat finish, you might actually get some benefit from that. But that's a rare situation. Usually you're with other people working together, you know, 2 or 3 other riders. It's very rare you'll be completely on your own. The other thing you might be doing if you're on your own is climbing, because that's when the group kind of breaks up a lot, right? You get the better climbers breaking away. And if you're a better climber, if you're breaking away from the group, you don't want an aero bike, you want a lightweight climbing bike. There you go. In my opinion, here's another one. My opinion, lightweight climbing bikes, they handle better. Often the geometry of the frames is better because they're not constricted by having to try and make the frames more aerodynamic. They handle better. Like, a lot of the lightweight climbing frames are very nimble. Like, again, TCR versus Propel. The Propel doesn't handle well. I've heard it from customers that own it when they've switched. I had a customer switch from a Propel to a Lightspeed T2. The Lightspeed T2 isn't aero at all. It's not an aero bike at all. It's a, you know, lightweight climbing titanium frame. And he said the difference was massive because he felt more confident in the corners and he could go faster going downhill and stuff because the bike just handled better. You know, better geometry, better feel, better comfort. So yeah, quite often the lightweight bikes, they're better ride feel all overall, not just comfort, but in general they handle better. So there you go. What I would say is, it's starting to rain now, so I've got to pack up. What I would say is, don't sacrifice all the good things about a lightweight climbing bike in favor of maybe one thing that's good about an aero bike. And with that, I better put my microphone away before it gets damaged because it's not waterproof. Alright folks, thanks for watching. As always, when you're out riding, try and stay safe. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye.